2021 academic year has been marred by weeks of student protests against the cost of higher education. Several universities have now allowed qualifying students with historical debt to register. Today we're focusing on South Africa's higher education crisis. Our reporters are across the major institutions to find out what the plans are going forward. Silindelo Masikane joins us from Wits University. Nobesuthu Hejana is in Cape Town with Dasen Thathiah joining us live from Durban. Let's go to Silindelo first, and what is it that you are finding there? I mean, what are the major gripes?
Well, good morning, Jane. We are here at the Wits University main campus in Braamfontein, where, in fact, the beginning of those student protests earlier this year, this is where they actually began, with a number of students taking to the streets of Braamfontein, demanding free higher education, as well as the end of financial exclusion. Those protests at some point turned violent, and a man fatally lost his life due to the clashes as well as the police action that took place here in Braamfontein. And since then, we are on campus actually for the first time since those protests began. It's the first time we are being allowed on campus. It is pretty quiet, but we are seeing a lot of student movement. But just to give us an update on where we are with regards to the protest actions and the demands that were put on the table by the Wits SRC, I am joined by the president of the Wits SRC, Pendulo Mfeka. Last time we spoke, Pendulo, there was a vow or a mandate from the student body to continue with protest action. Just give us an update on where we are with that, as well as some of the demands that you had put on the table for management.
Okay, thank you for having us. First and foremost, I think I must emphasize that protest action will continue, right? And by continue, I mean we must not look at this as an interim demand. It's a long time. It's a demand that's longer than some of our very existence in university spaces, right? So it precedes my space at Wits, it precedes my time at Wits. So it will continue, even if it's not by us at one point or the other. And then second and foremost, I think to the first is the fact that we still have SRC members who are currently suspended. We've seen what is happening in UKZN, we've seen what is happening in MUT, we've seen what is happening in DUT. Clearly things are still unstable, right? Especially as it regards the initial or the interim demands, right? And then as it regards the free, quality and decolonized education, it's a call which we will constantly fight for and constantly champion. As it stands currently, not only do we still have students and SRC members who are suspended, but justice has not been found from Thokoza Sintumba. And if we go back to class, and having not found justice for Thokoza Sintumba, what happened in Braamfontein to him would have happened in vain.
Where are we with the demands of management, the talks with management? When was your last meeting? What were some of the resolutions made? So
our last meeting was last week on Thursday, and we reached a deadlock and were scheduled to meet during the course of this week. And the deadlock was in saying, look, they must remove all suspensions that have been tabled or scheduled against SRC members and students. And second, not only must they remove all suspensions, but they must allow everyone to register. As it stands currently, we have over 400 students who are still unable to register due to financial deadlock and backlogs, I mean to say. And it's something which we are constantly working on. We've tried raising money to try and help as many as we could, but unfortunately we could not help everyone.
And, of course, there was an end to the national shutdown. The Wits SRC, mandated by the student body, said that they don't believe in the shutdown ending. Do you think the talks that are happening in the boardrooms are yielding results? Because from the Union of Students, they're saying that the fight now needs to go back to the boardroom.
So I must be honest, right? We continue to have engagements with the Union of Students. We continue to have engagements with everyone, right? And unfortunately, if those engagements were yielding fruit, we wouldn't be where we are, right? And by where we are, we wouldn't be having students who are still outside the system. We wouldn't be having students who are still suspended. We wouldn't be having what is happening at UKZN. We wouldn't be having what is happening at MUT. We wouldn't be having what is happening at DUT, what is about to surface in other universities, because we speak as presidents across the country. And as it stands currently at Wits University, things are a bit quiet or silent because it's test week as I speak to you, right? The medics are writing exams, the law students are writing tests, they are having practicals and so forth and so on. So the commitment, the level of commitment is not at the level at which it should be. and we must call students out for this, right? The fact that you've been assisted as a student doesn't mean the next one who's outside the system now must fend for themselves, because someone had to do the same thing for you to be in the system at this point in time. But it's a conversation which we'll address alone as students internally, and hopefully as time goes we will find an amicable way. But briefly, we've gotten very little fruit from the engagements from the department and everywhere else, stakeholders that we've spoken to, and hopefully the only way which we will find answers to our questions will be through the picket line again.
Does the student body still have confidence in the government officials that are heading the higher education system, in particular Blade Nzimande?
No, we do not, and we say that without fear of contradiction, right? Every time Blade Nzimande is in that department, crisis allooms this country, like it gets out of hand. In his first term, I think, as Minister of Higher Education, we saw what happened. The wake of fees must fall and the other student-related protests, right? Now, at this point in time, in fact, who redirects higher? There's two things you can't defund in this country. You can't defund health, you can't defund higher education and basic education, right? So once you take away 7 billion rand out of the budget of higher education, only to redirect it at a later stage, not only are you causing and creating a solution for a problem, right, but you are it's an unsustainable way of running the department.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Jane, that is the Wits SRC President, Mpendulo Mfeka. As you've heard, that they will be returning to the picket lines.
All right, thanks very much for that, Silindelo. Let's pop over to Cape Town. Nobesuthu is over there, and what is it that you are finding happening?
Well, Jane, we also had similar protest actions in the province where we saw the University of Cape Town and the Stellenbosch University, as well as TVET colleges around the province, joining into those student protests last month. But we did hear from NSFAS saying that they do have funds available to ensure that all deserving students do register with historic debt. But we can also, it's important to note that the UWC University did allow students to register. It was in fact the first university to allow students to register with historic debt, but it did say that it doesn't mean that those outstanding fees will be scrapped out, but it will give university students a time or a chance where they can be able to pay for those outstanding fees. While the University of Cape Town also allowing students to register with historic debt, and they've also made funds available to assist deserving students throughout the year. And they've also mentioned that it's something that they've been looking into due to the fact that there's been a number of protests in the beginning of the year where a number of students would say that they are unable to register due to the delays of payments by NSFAS. But we did speak to the University of Cape Town spokesperson Elijah Maholola, and this is what he had to say.
What we have done is that we have made available 30 million that goes towards supporting students who may be in need of financial aid. We have spent in 2020, we have spent about 1.4 billion overall on funding students at various levels, undergraduate and postgraduate. So we anticipating that, in fact, in 2021, we will spend slightly more than that amount, more than the 1.4 billion spent in 2020. And that is actually something notable considering the kind of financial climate that we find ourselves in, to be in a position where we can spend a little bit more on student financial aid. Part of that is the 30 million that I alluded to earlier that has been made available by the university to support students, undergraduate students across various categories who are going to now be able, who have been able to register in 2021.
Thanks, Nobesuthu. Let's pop over to Durban now. Dasen Thathiah is standing by. When it comes to safety and security at universities there, what are you finding?
Well, let me start with this. We're outside DUT now, and it's a lot calmer than it has been in recent times. You know, just to take you back a little bit, you would remember that there was that hoax message that had sparked registration, that had sparked complete registration chaos here at the institution. That had resulted in some students or those intending to register being arrested, about 16 of them. If you looked at about 2 months ago, there was also a scuffle outside here with different groups of students that had resulted in some of those also being stabbed. So right now it is in a lot quieter position, and that has a lot to do with the fact that DUT had closed off its campuses as a result of what had happened, but it had kept the online registration going, and that continues until Friday. But certainly safety and security at these campuses has been drawn into the spotlight in recent times over the past few years as well. We saw very recently at the Nobesuthu University of Technology that there were battles there between students. The police management was basically being held hostage, and they were relegated to their admin building and their admin block, and they couldn't get out. So it's certainly a situation that has called for more intervention than we are currently seeing. So yesterday we were with the Higher Education Minister, Dasen Thathiah, in Ulundi, where he was launching a separate project. But I had an opportunity to chat to him about this very issue of safety and security. And he had said to me at the time that it was something that they are also looking at. And to that end, he'd been having conversations with the Police Minister, Bekele. So he shared just a little bit about what their plans could be with us. Just take a listen to that.
I've had a very lengthy conversation and an agreement with the Minister of Police last week, to say that we do, in fact, we spoke on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, that we need additional deployment so that we are able to deal with the problems there. But I am aware that the police can help us thus far to actually just deal with the problem. We want to go deeper into the problem.
And Dasen, what plans does government have for the university?
And I think that's the key question, isn't it? The Wits SRC president had just been saying now that they had no faith in Nzamande's ability or government at all, if I'd heard that correctly. And it seems, though, on the other side of things, Dasen Thathiah tells us that he's been quite a busy man. There have been lots of consultations. And a lot of this relates to the historical debt. And that's been a key focus of these protests that we've been seeing. Students saying that they can't register because of these amounts that they owe. But although some of these universities have been making concessions to allow them to register, we're seeing that slowly happening. It still raises the issue of affordability, because not every student is able to benefit from not having to pay any fees. Others find themselves in a position where they are just being excluded just because of this very problem. So Nzamande has said to us that he's been involved in these consultations, and by around June, he would be expected to be presenting on what he has found and how they would move forward. Let's listen to what he had to say about that specifically.
The university went to the portfolio committee. The portfolio committee was very impressed that despite the enormous challenges that the university faces, like it's a rural university, it's actually admitting the poorest, students from the poorest of the poor, but that it is setting an example of how, despite all these shortcomings, things are actually being done. We are doing our best also as the department, by the way, to give additional support to former black universities, especially rural universities. So I'm quite satisfied that much as there is lots that still needs to be done, like provisioning of student accommodation, we need much more student accommodation and safe student accommodation, in particular against violence, and in particular against gender-based violence that is actually sometimes directed at female students. We are looking into all those things and working very closely with you.
This is an important topic. We're going to be keeping our focus on it across the country. Dasen Thathiah, Nobesuthu Hejana and Silindelo Masikane.